In my house, I wasn't allowed to sit on the couch without changing clothes. That was one of Clara's earliest rules. Outside clothes carry bus seats, office chairs, restaurant grime, elevator bacteria, and whatever else people drag around all day, she told me the second week after I moved in. If you want to sit on the couch, shower first or change. At first I laughed. She didn't. I'm serious, Evan. I know, I said, still smiling. It just sounds intense. It sounds clean. So I changed. That was how it started. Not with shouting. Not with threats. With tiny instructions delivered in a calm, reasonable voice that made resistance sound childish. Shoes off at the door. Phone wiped with alcohol before it touched the counter. Backpack never on the dining chair. Mail opened over the trash can. My mother could visit, but only if she called 2 days ahead and wore the house slippers Clara kept in a sealed plastic bin labeled guest. Isn't that a little much? I asked once. Clara looked up from spraying the kitchen handles. You call it much. I call it basic respect for the environment we live in. Environment. She never said home when she was enforcing something. She said environment like we were living inside a lab and I was the clumsy assistant contaminating her work. For a while I respected it. I told myself everybody had boundaries. Everybody had quirks. Clara liked order. Clara liked control over her space. Clara had grown up in a chaotic house and maybe this was how she felt safe now. So I adjusted. Text me when you leave the office, she'd say. Why? So I know when to start dinner. That sounded normal. Then it became, text me when you stop for gas. Then, send me a picture if you're staying late so I know you're really there. I stared at her. You need proof that I'm at work? She folded a towel with perfect corners. If that bothers you, ask yourself why. That line became her weapon. If I didn't like a rule, it meant I was hiding something. If I wanted privacy, it meant I was defensive. If I wanted space, it meant I didn't care about the relationship. One night Marcus called and asked, You coming Friday? For what? My birthday, man. Dinner. Drinks. Existing as my friend. I looked at Clara across the kitchen. She was wiping down the stove for the second time. I'll let you know, I said. Marcus went quiet. You have to ask permission now? I'm not asking permission. Clara's eyes lifted. I lowered my voice. I just have to check. After I hung up, she said, Marcus doesn't respect boundaries. It's his birthday. And he always wants you out late. Then you come home, touch everything, and throw off the whole system. It's one night. It's never one night. It's one night, then one exception, then another. That's how standards collapse. Standards. Everything with Clara came down to standards, systems, discipline. But the rules only ever tightened around me. Her brother could drop by unannounced because family is different. Her coworker Jenna could wear jeans on the couch because she's careful. But if my sister showed up after work, Clara would smile tightly and say, Could you maybe not lean on the bedroom wall? I sanitized there before bed. The first time my mother cried because of her, I knew I should have left. Mom had come over with soup when I had a fever. She took one step toward the kitchen and Clara said, Mrs. Hale, I'm so sorry, but did you wash your hands after touching the elevator? My mother froze. I can do it now. Clara gave a little laugh. I'd prefer before entering, actually. After Mom left, she called me. Evan, she said softly, is everything okay in that house? Yeah. Are you sure? I looked at Clara through the glass pantry door, reorganizing spices by height. Yes, I lied. The worst part was that Clara never sounded wild. She sounded logical, polished, controlled. If I pushed back, she'd tilt her head and say, I'm trying to build a peaceful life with you. Why are you fighting peace? It took me too long to understand that peace and silence are not the same thing. I wasn't peaceful. I was managed. Then there was the phone. At first, it was just disinfecting. Your screen touches public surfaces, your face, our sheets, she said. Wipe it down. Then it became, don't put it on the bed. Then, who texted you? Then, why did you smile at that message? I held my phone tighter. It was my cousin. Then why are you acting weird? I'm acting weird because you're interrogating me. I'm asking. You hear interrogation because you're already defensive. Again. Always that twist. She would move the floor under me, then ask why I couldn't stand straight. But one rule mattered more than all the others. No one enters our bedroom, she said the day we moved in. Ever. Not even guests? Especially not guests. Why? Because that room is the only place in this house that stays untouched. Clean. Private. Ours. And she meant it. Delivery men couldn't cross the hallway. My mother wasn't allowed past the living room. Her own brother got scolded once for stepping near the doorway with a jacket in his hand. Out, she snapped. He laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. After he left, I said, "You embarrassed him." She turned to me and said very quietly, "That room is sacred to me. If you love me, you will respect that." So I did. No one entered our bedroom. No one. That was the rule she protected most fiercely. Which is why the sight of those shoes nearly stopped my heart. Thursday plans changed. I came home early, climbed upstairs, saw our bedroom door shut, and Ryan's shoes outside, perfectly aligned on the mat like evidence. I stopped halfway down the hall. Ryan's shoes were brown leather, the kind he wore even to casual dinners because he liked looking expensive. I knew them immediately. They were outside my bedroom door, side by side on the mat Clara insisted stayed perfectly aligned at all times. The door was closed. Not cracked. Not casually half shut. Closed. I didn't knock. That surprised me more than the shoes. Old me would have pushed the door open and demanded an explanation before my heartbeat caught up. Old me still believed explanations mattered in houses like this. But I had spent too many years inside Clara's logic. I knew the most revealing thing was never the first answer. It was what came before the answer had time to dress itself up. So I stood still and listened. Muffled voices. Her voice first, low and fast. Then Ryan's, softer, almost amused. A drawer opened. Something metallic clicked. Then Clara laughed. Not flirtatious. Not breathless. Comfortable. That somehow irritated me more. I set my keys on the hallway table hard enough that the metal tapped wood. Silence. A beat later the bedroom door opened. Ryan stepped out first, sleeves rolled, holding a small tape measure in one hand like a prop he had grabbed half a second too late. He stopped when he saw me. "Evan," he said. Behind him, Clara appeared in the doorway. And there it was. Not guilt. Panic. Her face drained, not because she'd been caught cheating, but because she'd been caught violating the rules she had built a religion around. I looked at Ryan. Then at the open bedroom door. Then back at her. No one spoke. Finally Ryan lifted the tape measure a little. We were just checking dimensions. For what? I asked. Clara answered too quickly. The air unit. I kept my eyes on her. The bedroom air unit. Yes. The room no one enters. Ryan shifted his weight. Clara stepped fully into the hall, blocking part of the doorway without seeming to realize she was doing it. "It's not what it looks like," she said. I almost laughed. "I haven't said what it looks like." Ryan cleared his throat. Clara asked if I could look at the vent layout. My cousin installs filtration systems. I told her I'd measure the space and send him pictures. I nodded once. Pictures. Clara said, "He sanitized. He took his shoes off before going in." I stared at her. Then I looked down at the shoes outside my bedroom like they were the punchline to a joke that had taken 4 years to land. Ryan must have felt the temperature change because he took one careful step back. "I can go," he said. Clara didn't look at him. Yes. He looked at me like he wanted to explain himself more clearly, but I gave him nothing to work with. No anger. No raised voice. No invitation to become important in a conversation that wasn't actually about him. He picked up his shoes, nodded once and left. The front door shut downstairs. Then it was just me and Clara in the hallway, with the bedroom open behind her like a crime scene made entirely of hypocrisy. She folded her arms. Defensive already. "You came home early. Obviously. You were supposed to be late." "I know." Ryan was helping me. With the sacred room. Her jaw tightened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Be sarcastic." I smiled a little. "I'm being precise." She looked at me the way she always looked at me when she wanted to reset the balance. The expression of someone preparing to explain reality to a person she considered less disciplined than herself. "It is different," she said. There it was. I repeated it softly. "It's different." "Yes." "How?" She blinked once. "Because this was necessary." I nodded. "Necessary?" "Yes." The filtration issue affects sleep quality, and Ryan had access to someone who could help immediately. I leaned against the wall. My mother wasn't necessary when she stepped near the hallway with a soup container. That's not fair. Marcus wasn't necessary when he asked to use the bathroom. That was different. My sister wasn't necessary when she left her scarf on the bed for 3 seconds. "Evan." "No, say it clearly." My voice stayed mild. That seemed to bother her more than if I'd shouted. "Explain how the rule worked when it was humiliating me, but disappeared when it was convenient for you." She looked past me toward the stairs. You're turning this into something ugly. No. I'm turning it into something accurate. Clara pressed her lips together. I was trying to solve a problem. So was my mother. She was trying to bring me soup when I had a fever. That is not the same thing. Because you say so? Because I understand the system in this house better than anyone. I let that sit there between us for a second. Then I asked, "Do you hear yourself?" She stared at me. I pushed off the wall and walked past her into the bedroom. She gasped. The room looked like it always looked. Hospital corners on the bedspread. Nightstands wiped clean. The air purifier humming in the corner. Nothing dramatic. No evidence of betrayal except the obvious one. Someone had been allowed in. Clara followed me in, furious now. "What are you doing?" "Standing in my bedroom. You still have your work clothes on." I turned and looked at her. That was when something changed. For years I had treated her rules like weather. Inconvenient, sometimes absurd, but still natural. Standing there in outside clothes on her sacred floor, with Ryan's visit still hanging in the air, I finally saw what I should have seen earlier. The rules were never about cleanliness. Cleanliness was just the costume. The real point was authority. She made the rules. She made the exceptions. She decided whose presence contaminated and whose didn't. The bedroom had never been sacred. Her control was. I did not leave the bedroom. That was the first rule I broke with full knowledge of breaking it. I sat on the end of the bed in my work clothes, felt the texture of the duvet beneath me, and looked at Clara while she processed what I was doing. "Evan." Her voice was the low, controlled one. The one that meant she was managing the situation before it became something she couldn't present as rational. "Please change first." "I'll sit here a minute." "You know the rule." "I know a lot of rules," I said. "I've been collecting them for 4 years. She looked at the door. Back at me. "You're being difficult. I'm sitting on my own bed." She turned and walked to the linen chest, opened it, removed the spare throw blanket she kept for the occasional time she allowed herself to lie down mid-afternoon, and set it on the mattress beside me like a compromise she was doing me a favor by offering. I looked at the blanket. "Sit on that at least," she said. I left it where she put it. She closed the linen chest with the specific precision she used for everything, the click of a mechanism properly secured, and turned back to me with her hands folded at her waist. "Can we be adults about this?" she asked. I thought we were being adults. Ryan was here for 15 minutes for a practical reason. "Tell me about my sister." Clara blinked. "Tell me the practical reason you gave me when she came over in September." She touched the pillowcase. She set her bag on the bed. "Which has outside contact." "For 3 seconds," I said. "While she was looking for her phone charger. You made her strip the pillowcase while she stood there. She cried in the car afterward." She told me. Clara's expression moved carefully. I was firm because the standard exists for a reason. "And Ryan?" "Ryan was he different because you trust him more than my sister?" "It's not about trust." "Then what is it about?" She didn't answer immediately. The pause itself was information, the kind she usually filled with a redirection or a reframe or the question she had weaponized for years. "Why are you being so defensive about this?" This time she didn't use it. She said, "Ryan respects the systems. My sister is allowed to cry in her car because you made her strip my pillowcase, but Ryan respects the systems. You're distorting what happened with Sarah." "I'm describing it. You always take her side." I looked at her. "I'm not taking sides. I'm comparing situations. They're not comparable." "Tell me why." The room was quiet. The air purifier hummed. Clara looked at the far wall for a moment, at the photograph she had framed and hung herself, both of us at a lake 2 summers ago, a day she had actually been light. I had taken that photograph 4 times before she approved one. "Marcus," I said. She looked back at me. "Tell me about Marcus." Her jaw set. "You know how I feel about Marcus." "I know what you told me. He's careless, he doesn't respect your space, he drags in energy from every bar and street corner he's been to." Those were your words. "Last February." "He is careless. He's been to this apartment 6 times in 4 years. The last time he asked to use the bathroom. You made him use the one in the hallway instead of the one by the kitchen because the kitchen bathroom has the good soap and you weren't sure what he'd touched on the street." Clara turned slightly away. "He had come from a public pool. He had come from walking across the park. He wasn't wet. You could look at him. Public parks are high-contact surfaces. You walked through the same park 2 days later. That's not the same thing." I let the silence handle that for a moment. "He went home that night and told his girlfriend he was never coming back," I said. She told me. He said, and I am using his exact words, "The cleanest house I've ever been made to feel unwelcome in." Clara's expression did something brief and controlled. If Marcus felt unwelcome, that was his choice. The dining table. She turned back. "You told him he couldn't sit at the dining table," I said. "He'd come for dinner. He was here because I had told him you were warming up to having people over. He pulled out a chair and you said very gently that you were saving those seats for after food, when everyone had washed their hands. I had just sanitized. It was his first time over for dinner in 2 years and you made him stand at the kitchen island while we ate at the table. That is an exaggeration. I was there." She picked up the throw blanket I hadn't used and refolded it with slow, careful movements. The refolding of objects when arguments got uncomfortable was one of her oldest habits. I had cataloged it without knowing I was cataloging it. "Ryan sat at our dining table last month," I said. Her hands paused. "The Tuesday you told me you were having a work call with a client," I said. "Marcus mentioned he saw Ryan's car outside when he drove past. At 7:30. When work calls don't usually run that late and don't usually require Ryan's car." Clara set the blanket down. "I'm not accusing you of anything specific," I said. "I'm asking you to help me understand the pattern." "There's no pattern. Your germophobia is selective," I said. It came out quiet and even, not a weapon, just an observation that had finally been named. "It applies to my family, my friends, my choices. It disappears for Ryan." She looked at me. "That's not. Why is it different for him?" Clara was quiet. Not the composed quiet of someone choosing their words carefully. The other kind. The quiet of someone who has been asked a question that has an answer they can't use. She didn't answer. That was the answer. I sat on my own bed in my work clothes and finally understood that I had been living inside a system designed to keep me small, keep my people out, keep her control clean and uncontested. And the only thing that had ever contaminated this house was not germs. It was the truth, which she had been very careful for a very long time to keep outside. I started on a Wednesday. Not dramatically. I went to work, came home, changed clothes without being asked for the first time in 2 years, and then sat at the kitchen table with my laptop while Clara did her evening routine upstairs. Shower, skincare, air purifier, white noise. I had approximately 90 minutes. The finances were joint in some areas and separate in others. We had talked about this in the second year when Clara said that financial merging was a stressor and that people in healthy relationships could maintain personal accounts without it meaning anything. I had agreed because by then agreeing was a reflex I had not yet examined. I had access to the joint account and to the household expense tracker she maintained on a spreadsheet she shared with me the first week of each month in read-only format. Read-only. I had accepted this too. Tonight I was looking at the read-only data with different eyes. The household expenses were meticulous. Clara's version of meticulous, which was different from most people's, categories and subcategories and percentage breakdowns and color-coded variance columns. Groceries, utilities, cleaning supplies, which had its own line and its own subcategory for disinfectants separately from general cleaning because they were, in her logic, different things. And under the category wellness and professional services. A line I had seen every month for 14 months without examining it. Health coordination and advisory. The amount was not alarming in isolation. We had agreed to include professional services in the household budget. I had assumed therapy, which Clara saw privately every second week. I had assumed the air quality consultant who had come twice to assess the apartment filtration. I had assumed the nutritionist she had consulted for 3 months when she decided the gut biome issue was affecting her sleep. I had assumed a lot. The amount across 14 months was $41,000. I set down my coffee. I looked at the number again. Not the monthly figure, which was possible to absorb as a category. The accumulated total, which was not. I went back through the months individually. The figure was not consistent. Some months it was lower, close to the therapy and nutritionist range I had mentally approximated. Others it spiked. January had been the highest. Then a gap. Then another high month in June. Then steady again. I opened a separate tab and did what I do when numbers don't have enough context. I looked for more context. Clara's professional service providers were, for the most part, referenced in her calendar, which we shared for scheduling purposes and which she maintained with the same precision as everything else. She had noted appointments, not always with full names but enough. Dr. Vance was her therapist. 2nd and 4th Thursdays. Nutritionist consultation. 3 months, ending in February of the previous year. Air quality assessment. 2 separate entries. Then RC. Listed without elaboration. Appearing first monthly, then twice monthly, then sometimes 3 times across a 4-week period. RC. I stayed with that for a moment. Ryan's last name was Callahan. I went back to the expense line. Health coordination and advisory. I looked up Ryan Callahan. Not his social media, which I had seen before, but his professional profile. He maintained a page I had never thought to examine closely because he had always been presented as Clara's old friend from university who had done well in the wellness space. Certified health advisor. Specializing in anxiety management, environmental psychology, and behavioral change coaching. Environmental psychology. I read the services list. Consultation packages. Monthly retainers. Intensive support programs for clients managing complex anxiety presentations. He was not a therapist. He was not a medical provider. He was a wellness coach. Licensed in the way wellness coaches are licensed, which is not the way doctors or therapists are licensed, but licensed enough to charge for the work and call it professional. I found his rate schedule. Monthly retainer, standard, $1,800. Intensive support retainer, $3,500. On-call availability package, additional $1,200. I sat back from the laptop. Clara was not having an affair with Ryan. I was more certain of that now than I had been, not because I trusted her, but because the nature of what she had built with him was more specific than attraction. She had outsourced something to him. The management of her own interior life, the translation of her anxiety into systems, the maintenance of the structure she needed to feel safe. He was not her lover. He was her architect. The person who had designed and was continuously maintaining the edifice she called a peaceful environment, and I had been living inside as its primary regulated variable. $41,000. Without telling me. Not hidden exactly. Hidden in the category name. Health coordination. Broad enough to be invisible in a read-only document reviewed by someone who had been trained not to ask questions that implied distrust. I thought about Clara's voice when she talked about transparency. She used the word often. Asterisk, I need to know where you are so I know you're safe. I need to see your schedule so I can plan around it. Transparency is the foundation of trust. Asterisk. I thought about the read-only spreadsheet. I thought about the RC entries. I thought about $41,000 across 14 months. Then I closed the laptop. Not in anger. With the specific clarity of someone who has audited a situation and arrived at an accurate picture and is now deciding what to do with the accuracy. I did not want revenge. Revenge required me to center her in my next move, and I was done centering her in anything. What I wanted was balance. The restoration of a truthful accounting of what this relationship had actually been. What it had cost. What it had allowed. What I had accepted as whether that was, in fact, a decision someone else had made on my behalf and charged me for. I opened a new document. I started writing. Not a confrontation. An assessment. The kind I should have been conducting for the last 4 years. I had been living in someone else's system. It was time to build my own. Marcus arrived on a Friday at 6:30. I had told him simply, come over, bring food if you want, use whatever door you want. He had been quiet on the phone for a moment, reading the tone of the invitation with the accuracy of someone who had watched this situation develop for 4 years from the outside. You sure? He asked. Yes. Clara okay with this? I didn't ask Clara. A longer pause. Okay. I'll bring food. He brought Thai, which was the right choice. I let him in through the front door with his jacket on, which he kept on while he moved to the kitchen and set the bags on the counter with the casual ease of someone in a house where he felt welcome. He looked at me once, checking. I nodded. He started unpacking containers. Clara came downstairs at 6:45. She had heard the door, heard the voice, done the calculation at the top of the stairs before she made the decision to come down. I watched her clock, the jacket still on Marcus's shoulders, the outside shoes still on his feet, the bags from a restaurant that had, by her previous assessment, questionable hygiene practices regarding shared utensils. Marcus, she said. The name arrived with a smile that was correctly shaped. Hey, Clara. He turned and raised a container. You eat Thai? I'm having something later, she said. Cool. He set the containers out and sat on a kitchen stool. Not the island stools she designated for casual use. The dining chair closest to him. Clara looked at the chair. Then at me. I was already sitting. In the living room. On the couch. In my work clothes, which I had not changed when I came home an hour earlier. I had come in, hung my jacket, sat down and stayed sat. The familiar pull toward the bedroom and the clothing change had arrived and I had observed it arriving and let it pass. She hadn't said anything about the couch. She had noticed. I could see her noticing every time she glanced from the kitchen to where I was sitting. But she hadn't said anything, which told me she was calculating what to address first and had not yet decided. I called into the kitchen. I'm going to eat in here tonight. Another beat. Okay, Clara said. She went to the refrigerator and took out something she had prepared earlier and stood at the kitchen island eating it with the focused attention of someone performing normalcy at high cost. Marcus and I ate and talked. He told me about the project he was finishing, asked about mine, mentioned a film he'd watched that I'd probably like. He said it the way he said things when he was in comfortable rooms, directly without monitoring anyone's reaction. At one point he got up, walked to the living room and sat on the couch beside me. Jacket still on. He reached forward and set his drink on the coffee table, which had a specific coaster arrangement Clara maintained with geometric precision. He set it beside the arrangement rather than on a coaster, close enough that anyone watching would see the proximity. I looked at his drink. He looked at me. Neither of us said anything about it. Clara cleaned the kitchen. She cleaned it more thoroughly than the situation required. The sound of her doing it was more than washing containers. It was the sound of someone whose system was being tested and who was responding to the testing through the only outlet available. Marcus left at 9. I walked him to the door. He stopped on the threshold and said quietly, "You doing okay?" "Better than I have been." He nodded. "Call me." "I will." He left. I closed the door. I walked back through the living room, past the couch, down the hallway and put my hand on the bedroom doorknob. Clara appeared from the kitchen. She watched me push the door open. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the bed. She stood in the doorway. "Evan." "Yes." "You still have your outside clothes on." "I know." "You know the rule." "I do." "Then why?" "Because I've decided the rule doesn't apply to me anymore." She looked at me for a long moment. Not with the anger I would have expected. With something more destabilizing than anger. Confusion. "Are you trying to provoke me?" she asked. "No. I'm sitting on my bed. In outside clothes." "Yes." She folded her arms. "What's happening with you?" "Nothing." "Something is clearly happening. I've stopped complying with systems that were applied to me but not to Ryan." She looked at the wall. "This is about Ryan." "This is about the standard," I said. "You've explained many times that the standard exists to protect the environment we both live in. So I'm wondering, does the standard protect both of us equally, or is it a tool that operates in one direction?" She said nothing. "Because when it operated in one direction," I said, "I changed my clothes and wiped my phone and asked permission before inviting my own mother to the kitchen. And Ryan sat in our bedroom with a tape measure for 15 minutes on a Tuesday night." Clara's jaw moved once. "I've explained the Ryan situation." "You've described it. You haven't explained it." She looked at the door. "I need you to change your clothes and then we can have a real conversation." "We can have a real conversation now." "Not when you're..." "Not when I'm not complying," I said. "That's what you mean. The conversation can't happen when I'm not in the position you've allocated for me." She looked at me. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. I watched her face change. Barely. The small flicker of someone receiving information they weren't expecting. She typed back quickly. Set the phone face down. "Who was that?" I asked. "Work thing," she said. "But Ryan's car was parked outside when I checked 20 minutes ago. And her phone didn't go face down for work things." "He's outside," I said. She looked at me. "Did you ask him to come?" I asked. Clara didn't answer. Which was the answer? I stood up from the bed. "Tell him to come in," I said. "I'll be here this time." Ryan came in at 9:47. He knocked this time. That was different from the first visit. That small adjustment told me someone had briefed him on the shift in the atmosphere. Clara answered the door while I sat in the living room. I heard the quiet exchange in the hallway, her voice low, his lower. The specific register of two people adjusting a plan in real time. Then they came into the living room together. Ryan was composed. He had the particular composure of someone who had made a professional study of composure and wore it as a credential. He looked at me with the measured warmth of a man who has been told a situation is sensitive and is responding to the briefing. "Evan," he said. "Good to see you." "Ryan." He sat in the armchair across from the couch. Clara remained standing for a moment, then sat beside me with the body language of someone positioning themselves between two things they are trying to prevent from touching. I let the room breathe for a moment. Then I opened the folder on the coffee table. I had printed the relevant pages. Not everything, not the full audit, but the pieces that spoke most clearly without requiring interpretation. I set them on the table and did not push them toward anyone. Ryan looked at the papers. Then at Clara. Then at me. I've been looking at our household accounts, I said. Specifically the wellness and professional services line. Clara's hands were in her lap. Over 14 months, I said, this household has paid for what the budget describes as health coordination and advisory services. The total across that period is $41,000. Ryan said nothing. I looked at the rate schedule for those services, I said. The description matches the packages listed on your professional website, Ryan. Monthly retainer, intensive support, on-call availability. A silence that had its own specific weight. I'm not here to litigate what those services involve, I said. I'm here because the amount was not disclosed to me. In a household with joint financial responsibilities, $41,000 is not a minor line item. It was categorized in a way that made it possible to review without examining. Clara said, I manage the household accounts. Yes. In a read-only format. She looked at the table. I'm asking a specific question, I said. Not about the amount. About the exception. I looked at Ryan. He met my eyes with the careful steadiness of someone who has been trained to receive difficult conversations without visibly reacting. You've been in this apartment more than any other person outside this household over the last 14 months, I said. You've sat at our dining table. You've been in our bedroom. You've come over in the evenings when I wasn't home. You've come over this evening after being contacted when things became uncomfortable. I paused. Clara has a rule, I said. It's the rule I've lived with for 4 years. No one enters this space without proper precautions. Outside clothes stay outside. Surfaces are sanitized. People who don't understand the system aren't welcome. My sister cried in her car because she wasn't permitted to stand near the bedroom hallway. Marcus stood at the kitchen island at a dinner because the dining chairs had just been sanitized and Clara was saving them for after the meal. I picked up the first page of the printout and set it facing toward Ryan. You've been in the bedroom, I said. Your shoes were outside the door. The door was closed. You laughed inside that room. You have been here repeatedly at hours that weren't casual drop-ins, and there is no record of you being asked to sanitize, to change shoes, to stay on designated surfaces, or to announce yourself 2 days in advance. Clara said, You're making this sound like. I'm asking one question, I said. If germs were the issue, why is he the exception? The room went completely quiet. Ryan looked at Clara. Clara looked at the table. The silence stretched past the point where it could be managed and into the territory where what lives in silence starts to become visible. It's not about germs, I said. I want to say that clearly because I think we all know that's true. The system in this house was never about cleanliness in the clinical sense. It was about defining who was permitted and who wasn't, who belonged and who contaminated, who could be trusted with the sacred room and who needed to be regulated. Clara's voice, when it came, was quieter than I had heard it. That's not fair. The rule was fair when it made my mother wash her hands outside the front door? She pressed her fingers to her temple. I have anxiety, Evan. You know that. I do know that, I said. I also know that anxiety doesn't explain a $41,000 arrangement that wasn't disclosed. It doesn't explain why the same anxiety that prevented my sister from touching a pillowcase somehow resolved completely in Ryan's presence. Ryan shifted in the armchair. I looked at him. I'm not angry at you. You provided a service someone was paying for. But I think you understand what I'm describing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, Clara, I think this is a conversation you and Evan need to have privately. She looked at him. Something moved in her face. The specific expression of someone who has relied on a presence and is watching it step back. Ryan, she said. I'll check in tomorrow, he said. He stood, picked up his jacket from the arm of the chair and looked at me once more. I'm sorry for my part in any confusion. He left. The front door closed. The apartment was quiet in a way it had not been in a long time. No air purifier hum, no spray bottle, no the careful sounds of a system being maintained. Just Clara sitting across from me with the financial records on the table between us. She had no reframe available. No question to turn back on me. No rule to invoke. No system to enforce. She looked at the papers. Then she looked at me. For the first time in 4 years she had no defense. She opened her mouth once. Closed it. I waited. The silence was not mine to fill this time. She cried for 20 minutes. Not immediately. First came the silence, which lasted longer than I expected, and then a careful attempt at reconstruction. She picked up one of the printed pages and looked at it the way she looked at things that had entered her space without permission, with the focused analysis of someone trying to find the flaw in the intrusion. These numbers are contextual, she said. They're accurate. You're not accounting for what the coordination services prevented. Hospitalizations. Functional collapse. You don't know what the last 14 months would have looked like without support in place. I don't know, I agreed, because the support wasn't disclosed to me. I couldn't account for something I didn't know existed. She set the page down. I was protecting you from my worst periods. By keeping $41,000 of household expenditure in a category designed to be unreadable? By managing my own treatment without burdening you with the details. I looked at her. That's the version, I said. I understand it. It's constructed well. But the version where you were protecting me requires me to believe that the same woman who asked me to photograph my work desk to prove I was staying late was also trying to spare me from difficult information. Clara's hands moved to the armrest and back to her lap. Those are different contexts, she said. They are, I agreed. In one context, you needed complete information about me. In the other, I needed to be managed. That's not protection. That's a system with one person inside it and one person running it. She looked at the window. I know Ryan matters to you, I said. I'm not disputing that the work you've done with him has been meaningful. I'm saying the secrecy was a choice. And the selective application of your rules was a choice. And the read-only spreadsheet was a choice. You agreed to the financial arrangement. I agreed to a joint financial framework. I didn't agree to be given curated access to my own household. The crying started quietly. The way Clara's emotions operated, controlled even in release, the tears arriving without dramatics, her face staying composed around them like they were an inconvenience she was accommodating while continuing to function. I know I'm not easy, she said. No. I know the rules are difficult. Some of them, I said. Others are simply targeted. I have tried, she said. Every system I've put in place, I put in place because without structure I cannot function. You know that. You married someone who needed structure. I married someone who needed structure, I said. I didn't agree to become a variable in it. She wiped one eye with the back of her hand. The precision of even that gesture, the controlled single wipe, exactly enough. What do you want? She asked. I had been sitting with the answer to this question for 3 weeks. Since the Wednesday night with the laptop. Since the audit. Since the bedroom doorway and the shoes outside it and the comfortable laugh through the closed door. I want to be honest with you about what I've decided, I said. Not as a negotiation. As honesty. She looked at me. I've filed for separation, I said. The room stayed still. I submitted the initial paperwork yesterday morning. My attorney has the documentation. You'll receive formal communication this week, but I didn't want you to receive it without warning. Clara looked at me for a long time. You filed, she said. Yes. Without telling me you were considering it. I've been considering it since the shoes outside the bedroom door, I said. The filing followed 3 weeks of being certain. She pressed her lips together briefly. You're humiliating me. I looked at her. No, I said. I'm removing myself. She shook her head. Filing without even having the conversation first is. We're having the conversation now. After you've already decided. Yes, I said. Because in this relationship, conversations before decisions were used to reframe the decision until I arrived at the conclusion you preferred. I wanted to arrive at my own conclusion first. She looked away. That's not fair, she said. The coaster arrangement is fair, I said. The guest slippers in the sealed plastic bin are fair. The read-only spreadsheet is fair. I paused. I'm not arguing about what's fair. I'm telling you what I've decided. She was quiet for a long time. The apartment held its usual sounds. The purifier. The refrigerator. The ambient hum of a space that had been maintained at significant effort and significant cost to everyone who moved through it. Where will you go? She asked. I have somewhere. When? The end of the month. She nodded once, the nod of someone processing logistics because the larger thing is not yet available to process. I stood. I walked to the hallway, took my jacket from the hook and put it on. Evan. Her voice from the living room, quieter now. I turned. She was standing in the doorway between the living room and the hall, the way she stood in doorways, filling them with her particular composed authority, the mistress of thresholds. She looked at me in my outside clothes in her hallway with my jacket on. She did not tell me to change. I didn't mean for it to become this, she said. I know, I said. And I did know. That was the complicated part. She had not built the system to cause damage. She had built it to prevent it, or what she understood as damage, contamination, chaos, the uncontrolled. She had simply not examined who the system was containing once she built it. I opened the front door. The hallway outside was ordinary. Carpet, overhead light, the neighbor's door with its small wreath. I stepped out. She had said she feared contamination. The contamination she feared was everything uncontrolled, unpermissioned, unbriefed. Everything that arrived without following the protocol. She had missed the thing standing closest to her. I had been the only clean thing in her life. And she had spent 4 years trying to manage me the way she managed everything that frightened her. The door closed behind me. The hallway was quiet. I walked toward the elevator. For the first time in 4 years, I did not wipe my hands before I pressed the button.